So, welcome to number 6, section 6 of my ownership lecture, and it will be focusing on families. In the fifth section, I described the basic categories, how to describe owners according to me, and then I described some funds, government, corporations, and individuals called entrepreneurs. Now it's time for families that are quite distinctive owners today. In Sweden, they had a tendency to disappear almost in the 60s for the listed corporations, but that is not today. They have entered into ownership of listed firms today. It's fascinating with families. They are really fascinating owner categories. I try to show it here using the free circle model, as Gershik says, that a family ownership, that is really a combination of ownership, family, and firm. Characteristic for families is that the level of separation between ownership and control is low, or well, maybe moderate, but it's absolutely not high. Families are not famous for being owners that are far away from the corporation, not dealing with the corporation. They are not the ones that are sitting in London sipping their tea. They are typically engaged in their corporations. The engagement is that family members are engaged in the board of directors and very often also in the very management. And of course, they are engaged as owners. So they are owners, directors at the board, and management. The border between the family and the firm is sometimes very hard to find. There is a floating border, if there is a border. And then another characteristic is the thing with psychological ownership, and that is that the very specific owner could be an individual of the family, but the family as such consider themselves to be owner. So they have this psychological ownership. That psychological ownership is often also respected by employees, for example. That if someone is turning up from the family with and the name of the last name of the family, then they consider those as owners, even if they don't have any single share, but they belong to the family, and they consider the family to be the owner of the shares, even if the former title of the ownership could be in one single person. So it's a very floating border between the family and the firm and the ownership. One example I have here is from the annual report 2016. There has been changes, but it's the HM that I assume that it's as well known as IKEA. IKEA is not a corporation I could mention here because it's not a listed corporation, but H&M is listed on the Stockholm Stock Exchange. It's owned, controlled by the Persson family. It's based on ownership. Stefan Persson, with his family, has 70%. That this was 2016. Maybe it has increased now. 70% of the voting rights. So it's not majority. It's even more. It's almost qualified majority of the voting rights. He has a sister, Lottie Tam. Her family has 2.6% of the voting rights. So in total, they have almost qualified majority. If you inspect the board and the top management team, there is one person that is the CEO. Now 2016, today it has changed. It's Carl-Johan Persson. You look at the last name, it's Persson, yes, because Carl-Johan Persson is the son of Stefan Persson, and Stefan Persson is the father of Carl-Johan, and Stefan Persson is the chairperson. So they have perfect control of the ownership through voting rights and of the management, since they control the board as a chairperson and the top management team as a CEO. So that's the family business in its beauty. And then you should know that H&M was created by the father of Stefan Persson. So it has been the father of Stefan Persson, then Stefan Persson, and then his son Carl-Johan Persson. That's the typical family firm in heritage. When we look at the goals of family firms, they are quite focused on the family. When they do decisions of the firm, we assume, and we can show empirically, that the family owners do consider the family when they make decisions regarding the specific firm. So it's a decision concerning the firm have a consideration of the family, how to influence the family. They have a long-term perspective. That this is one thing that is very typical of family firms. They have a long-term perspective because in the goals of a family is the transfer of the firm. So they would like to transfer the firm to the next generation. Therefore, they have to assume long-term perspectives. It's the survival of the firm so they can give it to the next generation. That is the goal. So that means that the goals are quite non-financial. You would like to have autonomy. No one interrupts in the family control of the firm. That's really a holy goal. You have the goal of control. You have the goal of loyalty. You employ people and they have to be loyal towards the family. You stress belongingness. You belong to the family, you belong to the firm. And there is also, of course, a status in having a family firm. One thing that is quite important to ask is it really the case that the family have ownership in the firm? Maybe some family members think the opposite. It is the firm that owns the family, because the family sometimes appear to be a mean for the firm, not vice versa. But sometimes it's vice versa. So that shows the ambiguous border between the family and the firm. They are supporting each other. They are in togetherness. So wealth maximization is not always of financial character. It's not the maximum profit of the corporation. It's the maximum survivability of the firm. That is the wealth maximization, in order to maximize the wealth to the family, but not to the family today, to the family in the future. Therefore, you can say financial goals maybe are more means to fulfill non-financial goals. You make a profit because you would like to make the corporation survive. You don't make the profit because it's a goal. It's a mean to create the long-term survival of the firm. And that has, in certain articles, been characterized as the socio-emotional wealth. A family firm do not have the profitability as its goal. It has the socio-emotional wealth, the social and emotional connection to the family firm. So how does the family ownership affect the firm? Here is a small picture saying that, so what makes you think you're the right person for this post? Well, I'm highly motivated, outgoing, and independently minded. Those are the traditional thing that people mention when they are on an interview. And then he puts it, isn't that right, Dad? So the probability to be employed is quite high. The negative aspects of family firms is, of course, this thing, that you have a favoritism of family members. That is what it's called nepotism. Nepotism was the nepote. It's a relative that's created from Italian, from the Vatican state tradition of giving positions to relatives in the Vatican state. Rather surprising that the Catholic Church are doing these things. But that was the case. But then it has become a concept of when you favor someone from the very family. It is advantage to be of the family in this thing with the nepotism. Remember, if you look at, for example, me as a professor, nepotism for me as a professor would be to say, well, when I retire, I will give my position to my son. No one could imagine that to happen. That's impossible, because you have to have the competence of being a professor. In family firm, one of the basic competencies is that you are of family. That's nepotism. Negative aspect is that sometimes you can find family firms that have lower productivity and especially lower on innovation capacity. Maybe that is innovation capacity because they try to avoid risk, high level of risk, put the firm in danger. And since you would like to give the firm to the next generation, you cannot have too high levels of risk. They have excessive liquidity, they have too much money on the bank, and they have a high equity to assets ratio. That is because they would like to have independence. If you have liquidity, well, money is power. So if something happens, then you can always use your money in order to get out of a hard situation. If you have a high level of equity, you are not in the knees of the banks that lend you money. The banks cannot come to you and say, well, I'm looking at your equity. It's not good. We would like to have a position at the board. In fact, that was, I did a study of one family firm, and they said that the bank arrived to the CEO, that was the family father, and said that, well, we would like to have more information about the corporation. So in order to have these loans, we would like to have a position at the board of directors. And he said, okay, give me a week. And during that week, he went to another bank, negotiated with the banks, and then he changed the bank. So he fired the bank that said, I would like to have a place on the board of directors. No bank managers on my board of directors. It's only family. Keep it in the family. And then it's also famous for having poor executive compensation. They don't pay their CEO so much. They demand loyalty. Maybe the loyalty gives higher employment security, so that can decrease the spending on executive compensation. With all these negative parts, why do family firms exist? And in fact, they are really successful. They, in many studies, they outperform, even on financial ratio, outperform other corporations. And certainly they outperform them in corporate social responsibility and in survival. Sometimes, well, not the first generation, it's the second and third. Because the positive aspects, as you can see here, is this drawing that stress the long-term investment. I called you here to keep you in the loop as we made some very long-term investment. So it's the son or the daughter that is there. The son and the daughter is fueled by the ideas of the firm. It's fueled by knowledge about the firm from very low age. And that, one could say, is competence. No one knows about the history of a firm. No one knows about the considerations and thoughts about the firm than the family members, because they discuss it in the dining room. When they meet on Christmas, maybe not on the Christmas Eve, but on the Christmas Day, when they are eating the ham, again, they discuss the firm. So it's ingrained almost in the genes. So you get an owner with knowledge about the business, a very high level of knowledge, comparable to the Adam Smith idea of the good owner. You get a very strong ownership function because you don't expect the family owner to be passive, to be absent, to drink tea in London. You expect the family member to be present. They have a strong monitoring capacity, of course, so that compensates for the low incentive part. you have a strong monitoring capacity because you know the firm. No CEO can come to the owner that has been living with the firm the whole life and claim something that is not really true. The positive aspect is that they are long-term perspective. They don't do investment in order to get a positive gain for a short while, for some months, and then it disappears. And then they are, when we do studies, they are score high on corporate social responsibility. And that is not because they have corporate social responsibility as an ideological idea that we should promote corporate social responsibility. When you talk about corporate social responsibility with some family owners, they don't really understand, and they say, that's something that they are dealing with, this other listed corporation. It's a fashion. It goes out of fashion. We are not dealing with corporate social responsibility. And then when you ask them about that, the employment, how do you treat your employees? It shows that they are treating them very well. They are not distributing a lot of poison out in the environment, because the environment is where they are living. So they score high on actual corporate social responsibility. But when you measure the way of describing corporate social responsibility, for example, in the annual report, it's lower than the listed corporation. So they are having a higher level, but they are presenting it on a lower level. So there's a huge discrepancy. Family firms, they can gain much by learning how to describe their corporate social responsibility. I have one example. I was at the factory of a family firm. We were walking around, and the father of the family was telling me what was happening. And then we came to one place. There was a guy that was working very slow compared to the other ones, very slow. And I asked them, do you get subsidy from the government? Because this is a kind of corporate social responsibility. You assume you employ people that otherwise would not get any employment. And the owner looked at me and said, well, I don't know if I can get any subsidy from the government. This is a son from the village, and he has to have an employment. So here's his employment. Basta così, that was it. That was him assuming corporate social responsibility, but without thinking about it as a corporate social responsibility. It's the responsibility of him as an actor in this local community. So when we sum up the family, the investment competence and information about the firm is extremely high, because they are not. It's not really an ownership. They are living the firm. The competence is extremely highly firm specific. They know everything about their firm and the markets and all this thing. Maybe not so much about other things. Transferability is extremely low. One should say zero. It's not possible to transfer. The only transferability they know about is heritage, to give it to the next generation. Investment in networks and in business elite is probably very high. Family owners are considered to be rather important in the business elite. They score very high on respectability and legitimacy. In a way, it's very strange, because the first generation created the corporation. The other ones are only getting the corporation for heritage. They are not creating it. So Adam Smith, you should be really irritated on family business. The investment in capital is, of course, very high. They have to have it very high, because they have to own the corporation in full. And then, of course, even more with the votes, because that's where you can control it. Diversification capacity is extremely low. They don't want to diversify. They would like to have this. If they have money, they invest it in this corporation. Risk preferences, it's low. They don't want to assume high level of risk, because they would like to transfer the corporation. They are really afraid of bankruptcy. They don't want to be fired as owners through bankruptcy. Liquidity preference could be very high, because you need maybe to lend money in order to keep up the level of capital. The governance strategy, I would say, is not active, it's extremely active. They are present not only as owners on the annual meeting, not only as board members, but even as managers in the very firm. So it's really hard as a researcher, as an academic. You are not really allowed to admire anything. You have to have a cold eye, but it's really hard to avoid not being impressed by many of these family firms, because you should remember they are doing what they are doing is against what the modern society is about. You have to have competence, you have to have an education, you have to have good exams, you have to show capacity, and then you compete of the positions. That is the modern society. In a family firm, oh no, if you are born in a family, that's it. Then you can become a CEO of H&M. But is that really true? Maybe not, because I met several people in family firms that say that, well, I don't need to perform as well as other people. I need to perform even better because I have to have this margin, because I have to show with a margin that I'm not getting this position for free. So I have to perform better. And then, of course, remember, maybe it's not the family that owns the firm. Maybe it's the firm that owns the family. So the freedom of action for individuals in a family could be really feeling really restrained. I'm doomed to take control of the corporation. I'm doomed to make it go wider. So that was the family. Now go to business groups.